I was having a conversation with a few, I guess you could perceive them as influential people in their spaces. And I was like, for me, I don't want to hear three arguments. These three arguments, one, for us to say, like my father tells me, I don't want to hear this argument of blaming a white man. Like, that's the type of daddy I have, okay? I don't want to hear that excuse. Two, where the parents? Where the parents at? I don't want to hear that. And the third, it starts at home. These three phrases I am trying to rid from our narrative in order to force us to think differently. In 1619, and people can nod their heads and feel like, oh, here we go. But in 1619, that was the destruction of the Black family. That was the destruction of the Black home. That they can get tired of it, but I'm like, okay, I will skip through slavery until the part where we're free. Okay, so because we're coming up on Juneteenth, right? Right. So, but to understand, when we were free, two sets of Black people walked off the plantation. One set were people that clung to their faith. And when I say clung, like they held on to some type of shit, like they clung to their faith and they created some semblance of a family. They created something based on their faith and like pulling up by the bootstraps and trying to figure this shit out. And that thinking and heart and mentality traveled generation after generation after generation. And with the generations, you start to see how it's, I wish that I could have like an illustrator that shows how that group that walked off the plantation that I'm speaking of, how it starts to change from generation to generation, just based on that one principle of faith, pulling up by the bootstraps and trying to figure the fuck out that. And then you have the other group, the group that walked off the plantation and they were never able to break those chains. It's not even to say they didn't try. They grabbed onto the same thing that the other group did, and they did the best they could, and they relied on drinking, they relied on drugs, they, got abusive and, just angry and, bitter, and they killed each other, they robbed, and it happened generation after generation after generation after generation.
What happened with us is we were taught to rise above. We were taught we had to go to college. We had to get the high paying
job. To graduate from high school. My mother
had to you had to take these necessary steps to get out of poverty. And that was the goal. The goal was to get out of poverty. Once you got out of poverty, that meant to leave. And then you became part of that elite that looks back at Baltimore and says, oh, it's grimy, it's crime filled. I need to get my mother. A lot of conversations. Yeah, my mother, she's still living in the hood. Like, what? She's still living there? Like, that was the conversation. Get out of there. But when does the conversation become, if you have already left, let's come back? What about the people who are still there? The people who didn't just say, I got to get out of there. Some people didn't even have that as an option to get out. Not even just talking about people who are, not getting their college degrees. Some people who got their degrees and everything still didn't find a way to get out. Why? Because they got to the real world and found out, look, this is half
the homeless people that we are walking past are one of the most intelligent college professors.
Exactly. Like there's so my thought process is, in order to make that shift from the don't blame the white man, for people to not stop saying this, because the story isn't narrative. Don't blame the white man. The story is we're attacking the white supremacy system. It's not where are the parents. We're saying, how can we give these kids who don't have parents in a home a support system? It's not, it starts at home. These kids don't have a home. Where can it start? So
these kids don't have a home. So where can it start?
Exactly.